Thanksgiving and other food holidays might look different this year, maybe, as more people, at least in the U.S., take this new class of weight loss drugs that regulates appetite. Drugs like Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro are becoming more and more popular. The retailer Walmart's U.S. CEO recently told Bloomberg that shoppers who take these drugs seem to be purchasing less food. Walmart says it's not ready to draw conclusions yet, but while they're still buying less food, they're spending more overall in stores. Analysts at Barclays think that in the long run, products made by Pepsi and Mickey D's and even tobacco companies like Altria could take a hit. Others think it could impact the entire restaurant industry. Now, for more on this, on what's real and what's perhaps more scare, John Quelch, a professor at the Miami Herbert Business School. John, good to see you again. How much are we over, perhaps, or exaggerating the impacts of these drugs? I mean, after all, we're just learning about it the last year or two, and we don't have a lot of firm data points yet, do we?
The drugs, Phil, are intended to suppress cravings and reduce the dopamine flow to the brain, which results in us wanting more and more of our favorite foods. The suppression effect does impact the willingness of the consumer or the enthusiasm of the consumer for eating more and more. And so the more people who are taking these drugs, and there is, of course, a huge number of overweight and obese people in the United States, the more people who take these drugs, the more likely it is that they are going to be eating less, and that therefore the average portion size that they'll want to consume if they wish to leave a clean plate is going to go down, and consequently the total consumption of food could be affected. And that's what the Walmart evidence indicates.
Right, but that said, what percentage of Americans or folks around the world are actually using these drugs on a regular basis? I mean, there's 360 or 370 million people in the United States. Everyone's not on these drugs. What percentage of people are impacted by this?
No, it's a very small number at the moment, maybe no more than 1% of obese Americans who have other underlying conditions that are qualifying them for insurance coverage of these drugs. Medicare, for example, does not cover these drugs at the moment, and so they aren't readily available at low cost to consumers. In addition, the supply is simply not there to meet the demand. There's been a lot of publicity around Hollywood celebrities using these drugs, and that's fueled the consumer interest, but the cost is high, and there's no insurance readily available for most consumers, as well as low supply, so currently is very low.
So even if I agree with you and say at 1%, let's say, of the population is using these drugs from time to time, that's 3 to 4 million people on these drugs. And I get it. For the drug companies, that's a big deal. But for restaurants and grocery stores, I'm sure you have seen the prices. They're up a heck of a lot more than 1%. They're up 10, 15, 20, maybe even more in many places. Even the regular places I visit, that more than makes up for any potential drop in what people buy. Don't you think Wall Street or Main Street is perhaps over-exaggerating the impact this is going to have on their product? And maybe, for lack of a better word, quite frankly, just using it as an excuse because sales might be a little bit flat.
Well, certainly. I mean, every business, of course, copes with and learns how to cope with a new technology that bears on the demand for its products. And so many restaurants are already adjusting their portion sizes in response to consumers who are more health conscious, and they're not necessarily having to charge a lower price for that lower volume of food on the plate. So I think that the notion that this is going to somehow decimate the restaurant industry, that's exaggerated. There's a Goldman Sachs study that indicates that around about 13% of obese Americans might be on these drugs by 2030, representing $100 billion in annual drug sales. You know, 7 years still remaining for businesses to adjust to that new reality, if indeed it comes to pass. And we don't know yet about how many people are really affected by side effects, or whether or not the efficacy of these drugs wears off over time with continuous use.
Yeah, John, I mean, it's certainly been the one of the big stories of 2023, and I'm sure we'll continue to talk about this into next year. We shall all monitor the data as it comes in. John, appreciate you, and hope you have a little turkey coming up.